This is lecture 8C, third part. So last time I talked about Greek culture. I want to turn now to look at an offshoot of Greek civilization, which is the Roman culture and civilization. I mentioned in the first part of this lecture that the Greeks were great colonizers. They sent out groups of Greeks to found new cities and city-states in Sicily and southern Italy, etc. And so from a very early time, the Italy in particular was a sort of outpost of Greek culture. It was not nearly as developed as Greece was. It didn't have the big cities. It was more agricultural and rural, but it was closely tied culturally to the Greek world. And in the middle of this, there was a kingdom emerged called the Etruscan kingdom, and the Etruscans were on the periphery of the Greek world. They weren't entirely Greek; they spoke different languages, but they had a lot of influences from the Greeks. And we don't know a whole lot about where the Etruscans came from or what they were like, but we do know that in 509 BC, a group of people from the city of Rome overthrew their Etruscan king and set up a new thing, a Roman Republic. Okay, and this was sort of modeled on the democracy idea in Athens, Greece. And essentially in the Roman Republic, there were two groups of people. There were the patricians, who were big landowners, wealthy landowning aristocrats, basically. And then there were the plebeians, who were small landowners, they small independent farmers. And the patricians often had slaves and such as that. And then, so what the Romans did is they set up a government, which was a republic. They did not have a king. Instead, all the patricians could vote in the Senate. And so the Senate was the governing body of the Roman Republic. And then the Senate every year would elect consuls who would function as the executive for that year. And so the patricians would rotate through the office of consul. And the Roman Republic was fairly dynamic, and southern Italy and central Italy was a wealthy area, and so Rome grew dramatically. And of course, Rome is part of this larger Greek cultural network with trade, etc., with Greece and so on. And so Rome would then enter on a period of expansion. And it started slowly with them just coming into conflict with other little city-states and kingdoms in Rome, in Italy rather, and then gradually building there. But ultimately, Rome would begin to build an empire. So the first stage is from the founding of Rome until 264 BCE. The Roman Republic is essentially just sort of consolidating its position in central Italy, and then it's expanding slightly by taking on other little kingdoms or principalities in Italy. But basically, by 264, it has conquered most of Italy, and it's started to expand up into what we would today call France. But here's where they come into conflict with another city. And in North Africa, in modern-day Tunisia, is the city of Carthage, not very far from the modern-day city of Tunis. And Carthage was a major trading city, and Carthage really sort of dominated the Western Mediterranean. But as Rome gets bigger and bigger and starts to expand, it starts to come into conflict with Carthage over sort of who gets to control the Mediterranean. And in particular, there are lots of little port cities and trading centers in southern France and Spain that both Rome and Carthage want to control. And so between 264 and 146 BCE, there is, for about 120 years, there are three Punic Wars between Rome and Carthage. These are collectively called the Punic Wars. There's three wars. And these wars are real back and forth because Rome and Carthage are pretty evenly matched. And so they one time Rome would sort of win, and then another one Carthage would sort of win, and it was a really back and forth affair. And one of the biggest, most dramatic moments was in the Second Punic War. The Carthaginian general named Hannibal actually took African elephants across to Spain and then marched them across what would today be southern France over the Alps and into Italy to invade Roman territory. But the Romans were actually very good. Hannibal was actually a great general, and they couldn't beat him straight up. But what they did is they knew that Hannibal invading Italy had long supply lines, and he was kind of vulnerable to that. And so what the Romans did is they just kept fighting Hannibal. They kept losing to him, but they kept fighting him until his army was just exhausted, and essentially Hannibal had to go home because he couldn't subdue the Romans. They kept fighting, but because he had long supply lines and a limited number of soldiers, and the Romans could keep pulling up more soldiers, and they were right there at home, the Romans could sort of exhaust Hannibal. Finally, in the Third Punic War, a Roman general, Scipio Africanus, conquers Carthage. Okay, and they decide they're going to actually not just win, they're going to destroy Carthage. The entire population is taken into slavery. They destroy the city. They burn it down. They salt the earth around. They plow salt into the earth for miles around Carthage so that nobody can live there because the earth is too salty for agriculture. And they basically just wipe Carthage off the face of the earth. Right? And this meant that Rome now controlled most of the Western Mediterranean. But there's one other part of the Roman Republic's expansion, and that is, as part of the Punic Wars, Carthage turned to the Antigonid Empire in Greece and said, "Can you help us out against Rome?" And the Antigonids did. They were basically allied with Carthage from 215 to 148, and as part of that, Rome actually invades Greece and knocks off the Antigonid Empire and conquers that entirely. So really, and then once they've knocked off the Antigonids, then they really come back and crush the Carthaginians at the end of the last Punic War. So Rome really just destroys the two major powers in the Mediterranean. They did not destroy the Ptolemaic Empire in Egypt, which is still there, but they destroy the Antigonids and they destroy Carthage. And so now Rome really controls an enormous chunk of territory by 146 BCE. They control all of Italy, parts of southern France, big chunks of Spain. They control chunks of North Africa. They control Greece. And they control some chunks of Anatolia, modern-day Turkey. So the Roman Republic has suddenly become enormous, right? It's becoming an actual empire. And I want to point out that the Romans had a real genius for military organization and for bureaucratic organization. Okay, and this is where the Romans are different than the Greeks. The Greeks are so totally individualistic. They're brilliant. They come up with brilliant philosophy, brilliant art, brilliant architecture, brilliant mathematics, but they really aren't great at organizing governments to be efficient. But the Romans really are, for a lot of the Roman Empire, they're really sort of building on what the Greeks have done culturally. They're developing Greek culture. But their genius is in organization, of military organization, bureaucratic organization, and even geographic organization. The Romans build great cities. They build fantastic roads. They organize great bureaucracies. They have an efficient tax system. They have this great military system. And so Rome really is sort of becomes the systematizer in a way that Greece never was. And this is why Rome builds a big empire and Greece doesn't. Right? I mean, yes, the Greeks, built the Alexander's Empire, but that broke up right away, right? So the heart of the Roman Empire is the Roman legion, which is incredibly disciplined. But also the Roman legion basically is made up of plebeians, small farmers who were required to go and serve in the military for a certain amount of time. And it's led by patricians as officers. Members of the Senate often go off to lead an army for a while. But the Roman legions have a good tax base behind them. They have a good recruitment system for legionnaires, and they have an incredible sense of discipline. And so the Roman legions are, for a while, really just sort of undefeatable. They crush everybody who gets in their way, and this is a real key to Roman expansion. But we're going to see in the next part that Rome really has some serious problems, has some internal problems that ultimately caused the Roman Republic to enter a crisis stage and give way to a Roman Empire. So we'll turn to that next.